to my YouTube vlog, I suppose. My name is Lizzie. I am the cleaner, manager, designer, graphic artist, administrator, marketer, branding specialist, and probably a whole load of other titles that I've definitely forgotten. Here at This Lombard, which is a company we're a brand that specializes in fancy-inspired gifts, stationery, and apparel, or clothing, as I like to say, because apparel sounds very posh, but gifts, stationery, and clothing, all inspired by your favorite fancy worlds, and that's basically what we do here. So yeah, currently you are sat, although it looks like you're sat in one of my fancy worlds here, you are sat inside my little studio here in King's Lynn in Norfolk. And yeah, so a couple of points of note. This is the first video of the kind of newly restarted ones. You'll notice it's very different because we're in my studio from the ones that I usually do, which are basically Vlogmas ones. No makeup, no frills, nothing fancy. It's all pretty much done on my phone. It's kind of like, it's very rough, raw, and behind the scenes. But that's what I usually do. I always do some of those. But this one's a bit more polished because this one is for my actual studio vlogs and things. So, yeah. Let's get down to it. This is going to be one where you are definitely going to want to go get yourself a drink, find yourself a snack, make yourself comfortable, because we might ramble on for a little bit. It's going to be a talky one for you today, and hopefully not too long, but a little bit of a talky one, because I spend a lot of my time looking at YouTube, seeing what my other YouTubers who are in a similar business to me are doing, and there are loads out there on YouTube about, oh, this is how I start my business, or if I could start my business today, these are the 3 things I do differently, or all that kind of stuff. This is not one of those. This is about the dark, grim, gritty times before I took on This Lombard as my main primary concern, the main thing that I currently do, and that, yeah, that's basically it. It's in fact the video that I think a lot of YouTubers turn and go, oh, definitely don't do this video. No one wants to see this video. And yet I'm there the kind of going, no, I really want to see this video because I want to know why you woke up in the morning, decided to throw the career that you were chasing out the window and follow this instead. So I always find these things very interesting. Anyway, some points of notes. I have a small disorder, which means that I will probably a little bit more than most. It's not actually possible for me to edit these things out, realistically speaking. It's not really possible for me to do that. So consequently, as much as I would love to make this a nice kind of streamless thing without any of those in there, I physically can't do it. Please don't post anything inside the comments about it. There's nothing I can do. And believe me, I have tried. So please don't do that. However, if you do want to go and you want to check out all the other things that I do, you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram handle is thislombard_arts, and you can find me on Facebook. You can find me at This Lombard. Simple, easy peasy as that. And you can also find me on Pinterest as well. Again, just This Lombard. And over on Threads, again, This Lombard _arts. And hopefully in the near future, possibly TikTok as well, if I can find the time in my day to be able to do that. So, what is today's vlog all about, you might wonder? You might also be wondering, like, why are we here? Well, because we're going to talk, like I said, about the dark, gritty times before This Lombard became main concern, who I am, what I do, why I do it, and why we got to the point that we are now. Because let me tell you, it was a bumpy ride. And we weren't supposed to be here yet. Note that I say yet. I think we were always going to get here to this point, but maybe not as soon as we did. There are going to be some times where you're definitely going to be looking at the screen and asking me why. Don't worry, I will have asked myself why a good healthy number of times before. So please be aware that some of the stupid decisions that I will tell you about here, trust me, I know. I know. But yes, So that's what we're going to do. So who am I? Like I said, my name is Lizzie. I am the owner. I have been effectively running Thistle and Bard kind of as a side project, then sort of a second job. But for this year will be our 5th year, which is a bit of a celebration. We are going to be celebrating this year our 5th birthday, which is a massive milestone for a small business like Thistle and Bard. It is a truly huge milestone because 90% of small businesses do not make it past the first year. So to have been and managed to succeed and still be here 5 years later is a big deal. So yeah, so that's what I am. That is what I currently do. But I did not always do that. Actually, for the majority of my life, for 15 years or more, I was effectively into branding, marketing, and I suppose customer relationships. And I was, I suppose, I'm not sure what adjective I would use for it, but I worked for one of the largest board game companies in the UK, one of the big boys. The time, and we're going to roll it back now, the time was 2012, and the recession had kind of taken its grip upon the UK. There were a lot of businesses that were going bankrupt. There were a lot of businesses that weren't hiring. There were a lot of people. Let me get off my own words. There were a lot of people who were not managing to find work anywhere. So, and I was fresh out of university. And somehow, some way, somehow, by perseverance and a little bit of luck, I managed to score myself a job at one of the biggest board game companies at a time when nerd culture was just beginning to arrive on the scene. Before then, it was all very much in a bedroom behind a closed door. No one really spoke about it. It was always sort of around. But I think kind of like the evolution of video games as they were coming out. And I think a little bit down to this business as well, nerd culture was definitely on the horizon and people were beginning to talk about it a little bit more. So it was a very exciting time to arrive on the scene. My job was fundamentally, I was right down there at the bottommost rung. Even though I had a degree by this point, I was right down there on the bottommost rung. My job was basically to encourage people to take part, join in, and take up a very, very nerdy hobby. This hobby included a whole load of literature. There was loads of books on it. There was we had people writing books for it. There was miniatures, painting miniatures, board games, the whole kit and caboodle. My job was basically to support the brand and make people aware of it. And that's what I did. It was effectively face-to-face marketing. So I did that for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years. And dare I say it, not to toot my own horn, I was pretty good at it. I consistently hit the targets and things that I was given, and I was pretty damn good at it. So after 1.5 years, 2 years, I ended up getting promoted. I went up to the second most rung, where I basically did more or less the same sort of stuff, but I had a little bit more control over some other cool things that I was actually interested in. At this point, like I said, I had my degree. I just done my English and creative writing. I'm more focused on the creative writing, you can kind of tell. But I ended up going into the next rung where I got to use a little bit more of that. My job then revolved around not only kind of like some of the stuff that I've been doing before, and brand promotion and the marketing of it, but Facebook was just coming on the scene. I had just kind of like got in, and I started up my a Facebook page. This was before any official Facebook page and things. Businesses weren't really doing that, but I could see that there was kind of like an opportunity here. So just started using some Facebook pages, creating all sorts of like IP assets, all sorts of things that encourage people to take part in this in this kind of like nerdy culture that was now kind of like going rampant and beginning to get a threshold on YouTube. So that's where we were. I'm going through this really quick, but you have to understand that there's probably kind of like a delay of a year, sometimes 2 years, in some of the things that I'm saying. But this was a really exciting time to be part of this community. Nerdy culture was kind of like just spring to the fore, and becoming kind of like an associated, liked, talked about part of what people did in their spare time. And began to kind of almost gain kind of like a prestige of its own. And a few famous names started dropping in, of things of like people who you wouldn't expect, who really indulged in kind of doing these board games and things. And that really helped the community sort of grow. And it is a community. The fantasy fan club, as I like to call it, is one hell of an amazing community. It's filled with a great amount of people, and some really talented individuals. And I was basically part of that. And I suppose to a certain extent, I still am, just in a different way. But I was still part of that. Right kind of like down just before the company that I was with took off. It was a great time. I was something, however, of an unusual element, because despite the fact that nerdy culture was taking off, it was still kind of like a very male dominated area. Women weren't really talked about. I'm fairly confident they were all there, but women and other genders, they weren't really kind of like talked about. It was very male dominated. So you can imagine when I came up to this level, there was a little bit of talk. Because while I wasn't the first woman to kind of have got to this level, there had been, I think, maybe 2 others before me. At various periods. At the time of 150 odd people who were all kind of like at the same level I was one of only 3 women. So it was very much a sausage fest. Anyway, so I was something of an unusual. People didn't. I don't think people really knew what to make of me when I first turned up on the scene. I always knew that I was going to be. I was something fairly unusual. That there weren't a lot of women. I didn't go into this blind. I always thought that was kind of like a great thing. And I think I kind of saw inside my head something of like a Joan of Arc figure that was basically going out and forging a path. I was like, there are women out there who want to do this. There are women out there who would love to be working and doing what I am doing. And I am forging a path, and I'm going to forge a path for those women. And there will be women who follow after me, and I will break through, and I will make that door available to them. Youth. So, and that's basically what I did. I forged ahead. And yeah, it took a fair bit of skill, a little bit of bravery, a little bit of guts. But that's what I did. However, nothing stays the same forever. And you're probably wondering about now, like, wow, if you had this amazing job, you're working for this amazing company, why are you doing this? And the simple answer is nothing stays the same forever. So the company that I was with was about to explode. And it was about to explode in a massive way. And its explosion came about 5 years ago when COVID hit the world. And everyone was forced to stay inside. Everyone obviously needed something to do. And one of the things that people chose to do was to use the products that this particular company sold. There are probably some of you looking at the screen at this point wondering, at what point am I going to tell you what company this is? Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not going to. There are a few reasons for this, none of which are legal. But the reason for this is, 1, I don't work for these people anymore. And 2, these people aren't affiliated with this. So, yeah, there we go. Yeah, people wanted things to do. And one of the things that they could do was use the products made by this company. Products that, now that I had to start the whole Facebook page, everyone else had a Facebook page at this point. There were lots of us who were all using Facebook in order to continue to do our jobs of marketing our products. Were basically the company just exploded. Because all people had to do was look on social media, look on YouTube, and they would find us, and we would be there kind of turning around and going, hey, look, there is a cool nerdy world out there, people, that you can go and enjoy, and that is very, very radically different from the disastrous hellpit of COVID that we currently find ourselves in. So that's what happened. When a company grows really big, really quickly, it comes across some problems. And there's no real nice way to put it. It always comes across some problems because it's not prepared and it's not ready to kind of grow at the speed that it is. And nerdy culture grew massively during the COVID era, like huge. And it hasn't died back. It is here very much to stay. And I, for one, am very much all for it. However, it grew massively big. And it became worried, I think, about who it trusted within its own establishment, which is a very sad thing. I don't really quite understand the whys and the wherefores because I certainly never got to talk to any of those kind of people. However, it became very scared of the people, of its own employees, basically. So once COVID began to die off and places started reopening again, it started removing the creative elements from my level, well, sort of my level, the level above, and definitely the level below that we were working on. And it would slowly remove them little bit by little bit. And we would get notifications of you can't do videos anymore because they all have to be centrally approved now, which is fair enough, but you are working for the company doing that thing. But you're not going to do videos, we're going to do a separate studio for that now. And then on to you're not going to be able to do localized marketing campaigns because we're going to go and have a separate thing for that now. And yeah, it was a bit of a crazy time. A lot of us who have previously had lots of success doing this were all sort of scratching our heads and kind of going like, well, what do you want our role to be? Because the digital age is upon us, people. And I mean, yeah, what do you want from us? And my honest opinion is, I don't think that the people that our senior reps, who were the people who told us where the direction of the company was going, I don't actually think that any of them knew. Is the simple answer. And honestly, I think with the amount of the amount of growth that was going on, I'm not entirely convinced that the company knew. So I think it was still kind of rolling, slightly concussed, like the can in the bottom of a drinks machine, about the fact that it had suddenly acquired all of this fame and had absolutely no idea what to do with it. So yeah. But as I said, the creative elements kind of like of my job began to be kind of pulled away. Bit by bit, until realistically the job that I'd applied for and the job that I had were two very different things. And the job that I applied for was not the job that I was doing. Because over the course of those years, it had slowly been kind of like, excuse me, I do have slight of cold. It had slowly been shifted and moved until realistically the two didn't have any kind of like similarity anymore. So yeah. And that made me very sad because I am a very creative person. Obviously, I would not be doing any of this if I was not a creative person, but I was a very creative person, and I was very sad about the fact that that had been kind of taken away from me. And that is the point at which I should have gone,
I need to go and find where that job went and go do that job.
That is the point at which I should have changed direction. but I didn't. And I think the only reason I can give for that was because I felt safe and secure. I had a paycheck. I could afford my living expenses. It felt safe and secure. And I think maybe part of me, the idealistic part of me, thought that maybe at some point, once things had kind of cooled off and settled down, things would return to normal. You know, the sudden knee-jerking approach to all of this was a temporary thing, whilst the business came to grips with the fact they had become sort of a COVID sensation. But unfortunately, it was not to be. The sad part of our tale is the fact that the reverse actually happened. Slowly, more and more things were taken away, and the things that were given to me and kind of put on me as part of my job had nothing to do with what I'd signed up for. Like I said, I'd had things like health and safety put on me. I have never received a single day's training in my life on health and safety. None. And here I was filling out like auditing paperwork and things like that. No training whatsoever on how to do it, why I'm doing it, what its purpose is for, what data, why the data is being collected, any of that kind of stuff. Obviously, I have a common level of common sense. I understood that health and safety was a thing, but I had no training, so that became part of it. Canvassing educational establishments and things, that became part of it, and the pay never changed, despite the fact that the company was making millions of pounds more money. The pay never changed. In fact, it didn't change for almost 10 years. I was still on the same pay rate that I'd been 10 years before. It hadn't changed at all. And it wasn't a great pay rate then. So you can imagine 10 years later, it definitely wasn't a good pay rate. Either way, basically, that is basically where we are now. If you see me kind of looking off to one side, it's because my computer with all of my business stuff is occasionally on it, and occasionally I need to give it a wiggle and check that it's doing all the things that it should be doing. For example, the lighting, we're about to receive some snow, and the lighting has kind of gone a bit weird, but we might deal with that in post-production. But yeah, so that's basically what it was like, and it was only going further in that direction. And as a creative person, this made me very, very unhappy. In fact, it made me so unhappy that 3 years ago, so you can see we've skipped forward quite quickly. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with depression, and I had it quite badly. Now, depression is something that is all over the internet these days. People are very aware of what it is, how debilitating it is, and everything else. But I will quickly summarize it here. Depression is an absolutely horrific illness, and it doesn't have a cure. And unfortunately, once you have depression, it never fully goes away. It just becomes a bit of a sliding scale. Depression basically means that during the moments that you are depressed, it is like living your life in grayscale. There is no color left in the world. You go to, if you are capable of doing so, you go to work, you do work, you come back more exhausted than when you got there, because by the time you got there, you were already exhausted. More exhausted when you got there, thanking whichever deity you prefer, that another day of your life was over, which is a horrible, terrible place to be. In my particular case, I was not going to work. I ended up not being at work for about 6 weeks or more. And during this time, it was like living in purgatory. There was no color left in the world. I felt fairly miserable. And unfortunately, I was too scared to actually tell my employers. In fact, my doctor at the time, when he sent me my fit note to allow me to go back to work, didn't put down depression at all. He put down stress, because the general thought process was like, well, you're a successful woman, you've got a successful career, you work with one of these big companies, and putting down the fact that they've caused depression, they have caused your depression, probably isn't the most tactful way to deal with this. So consequently, that was not put on my doctor's recommendation. That was not put on my fit note to allow me to work. And I did return to work. Maybe I shouldn't have done, maybe I should have done. Who will know the right answer to that question? But I did indeed return to work. I returned to work 6 or so weeks later. And in my naivety, because I had begun to be able to sleep better, I'd begun to kind of like have small sparks of joy in my life, I thought, hurrah, I'm fixed. Because I hadn't truly understood that this wasn't going to go, it was going to stay. I would now become a semi-permanent resident, and it would go from really bad days to days when it would be kind of like an annoying pigeon in the background that you want to shoo off the windowsill. So yeah, you can probably guess how well this went, because obviously when I went back to things exactly the way they were. And the only thing that was keeping me sane during this time was the fact that I had this Lombard. This Lombard I had set up kind of, well, during the heat of COVID, because I wasn't entirely confident that I would have a job to come back to. And I had been running it as a small kind of side project, almost a hobby, here in the background, basically. And it was the only thing. I was coming back after working for a day, and it was the only thing that was giving me any kind of like realistic joy. And it meant that I was living kind of like two lives. There were some points, there was the point when I was working at this and bar, but I would be kind of like fairly happy, or as happy as one can be when they have depression. And then there was some points where it was a case of like when I was working my job with this company, where I would have to fight against my mind every single day for 8 hours a day, trying to get my brain to align with the objectives I was trying to achieve. I think the final kind of like one of the final bits in the coffin that kind of like made me kind of go, do you know what? I'm doing something that I am not happy with. And yes, I know this is the point where some of you are looking at the camera and kind of going, God, there were a number of points here which you could have stopped, where you clearly weren't happy. But and I do understand that. But the full point, the full realization of kind of like the dead end that I was feeling was kind of like pushed towards me when I had a meeting with one of the senior reps. And I turned around and I said that this wasn't kind of like, I kind of lied. I turned around and said like, oh yeah, no, sure. I'm happy doing what I'm doing, but it's not the job that I originally applied for. I kind of wanted to do something a bit more creative. And that was the point at which I was told by the senior rep, you know, most women don't stay with us as long as you have. You should go and look somewhere else. Literally, I was told by a senior rep, you should leave. Now, at the time, I was like, this isn't okay. I've literally 24 hours beforehand, 3 of my male counterparts were promoted to not just like one level above, but like to like 2 or 3 levels above. 3 of them have just been promoted, and you're telling me as a woman that they can be promoted, but I can't? And I took it very much to heart. Now, I've obviously had time to think about it, and I do wonder if perhaps this senior rep wasn't entirely meaning that. I think perhaps, and they did it appallingly badly, but I think I'd like to think now that maybe, just maybe, there's the possibility that what they were actually saying was, you're a very talented person, you deserve better, and you should go and find that better. I like to think that that is the case, because to be quite frank, even though the evidence doesn't support that statement, I still want to feel that like there was still a little element inside that company that was still that still made sense, because a lot of it at this point really wasn't making sense. New departments, new things were cropping up all over the place. People were moving departments faster than like the average person changes their socks. And the knee-jerking from COVID hadn't stopped. It was still going. So, and it really did feel like everyone was just treading on eggshells, desperately scrabbling to find the nearest bit of sure land where they weren't going to be either dropped or moved off to do something that inevitably some of them didn't want to do. So it was a very kind of a lot of turmoil. And I would love to think that somewhere there was at least one person who had still kind of like maintained some element of like sanity and expressed it in the worst way fundamentally possible, but had retained some bit of common sense and sensibility. And yeah. However, I, at that point, didn't leave. I know that some of you are going to be looking at this guy and going, why? Literally, you've had all of these options. You've had all of these, you know, the universe was trying to tell you something. They were trying to tell you that you enjoy this thing and not so much this thing. And now you've had someone physically turn around. And I think the reason I didn't was because I still wanted to believe that they were wrong. I still wanted to believe that I could go back and I could still have that marketing job, that, you know, the marketing and the branding and the IP that I had originally signed up for, that was now all the way over there in their head office, locked behind doors in their head office building. I still wanted to believe that I could still be there. And it only came to and I worked myself to death trying to reach that point. There are many perks about being female in this hobby, and one of the worst bits of being female in this hobby, however, is the fact that you, like I said, you do attract a lot of attention. I have been no stranger to malicious comments, usually aimed at me when the nicer comments have not been reciprocated in the way that they want. But I have, you know, in this business, or the business that I was in, I have had people request sexual favors of me. I have been told not to turn up for meetings because people have bet on who can get me into bed. This is just cold. I'm not upset. Don't worry. And I have had some very unfortunate, nasty things. I've had people talk about me on Discord and make comments about how I look, how I present, like whether or not I wear makeup one day. I've had people pick apart things for no other reason than the fact that I was female in a very, very male-dominated environment. And the reason that I'm coming up with this now is because I continue to try and aim for that job that had been, you know, the job that I knew I'd applied for and I had since kind of somehow been kind of moved. And I couldn't tell you exactly when that had happened, but somehow I'd got here and I was like, I'm supposed to be there. How did I get here? But somehow that happened. And the reason I'm telling you about these comments and stuff is because after this, somehow, and I don't know where he came from. I don't know if he came up through the company or if he just arrived in the company. But an individual, a man, came into my sphere of influence. The bit that I still kind of like controlled and I was working with, came into my sphere of influence, and took it upon himself, for whatever reason, to really not like me. And originally I did think that maybe this was because when I was working there, I'm quite direct. I like to know what the aim is, what the goal is, where we're going, so that I can better figure out how to get there. It's a lot easier to understand a map if to understand a map and direct yourself from point A if you know where point B is, rather than kind of waddling around all over the map trying to find it. It's like some grand game of treasure hunt. So this guy, I thought maybe that's that's the issue here. I'm not fluffy enough, because I've done this job for so long, 15 years by this point, that I know I'm not. I know what questions to ask to get me the answers that I need in order to be able to do the thing that I'm paid to do. And that doesn't make me like not a team player or anything, but a lot of us were like that. So yes, but he came into my sphere of influence, and basically he took an immediate issue. Now, not everyone gels in a big company. When you're in a big company with thousands of people working there, not everyone is going to get on with each other. This particular person took it upon himself to basically, he would tell me he'd sent emails that I'd apparently read, that I know I never received. He would tell me that I'd signed policies that I knew I hadn't ever seen, but I was effectively gaslit continually. And then he would begin to give me quotas and goals where the percentage that I would be looking for, like the growth percentage or the acquisition percentage, was would be like 92%. But when I go and check from a male counterpart or a male colleague who's doing the same thing as me, theirs is like 85. And with no good reason as to why the bar for me was up here and the bar for them was kind of here. And couldn't provide any reason. But would continually make my life as miserable as it could possibly be, until it felt like every time I walked through the door to sit at my desk, I would be treading on eggshells. And it was at that point that my brain, for whatever reason, decided to ask me some very kind of like down to the earth questions. Question one was, aside from spite, why are you continuing to put up with this guy? Why are you continuing to let yourself be abused in this way? Because it was abuse at the end of the day. Why are you continuing to let yourself be abused this way? And then the second question was, if you're not happy here and you can't seem to get to where you want to go that would make you happy, why are you still here? And then the third question was, what if the thing that you're doing on the side wasn't a side project anymore? What if the thing that you're doing on the side, Thistle Bard, could have wings? What if it can fly, and you being here is what is stopping it from doing so? And bear in mind that I was getting more and more sad with what I was doing. And eventually I had to turn around and I had to agree with what my brain was effectively trying to tell me. I wasn't enjoying it. I couldn't get to where I wanted to go because I wasn't being allowed. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. I no longer had the thick skin, thanks to depression. I no longer had the thick skin to be able to deal with the comments. I no longer had the thick skin to kind of like push off advances and things like that. So I was already kind of like distancing myself. And yeah. And I couldn't, I had to agree with it. That what I was doing, what I was putting myself through was fundamentally fruitless. There was no, I was never going to get, there was never going to be a positive outcome from this. And this would just be a leap. I would be stuck in it, basically, which is not what I wanted to be. So, last year, in the middle of the summer, just before the summer holidays, I realistically felt I had two choices to make: stay, continue to get worse. I would eventually get ill. And if I got ill, how would I support my family, or in my case, my son? Or leave. And there would be a period of financial insecurity. But maybe, just maybe, the small business that I had would have the wings and it would soar if I just had the balls and the gumption to believe in it. And that's basically what happened. There is obviously a lot more to this story, but the genesis, that's where it happened. That's where it all started. That's what I did in the dark days before Thistle and Bard. And I have since been working on Thistle and Bard as my primary concern since those days. Am I making 10K months? Absolutely not. And I probably won't do for a while, but we never know. Am I pleased that I took the jump? Well, all I can say is it's an adventure. And I am one of those people that I'm a horizon seeker. I'm never, fully happy to stay exactly where I am. So there's that. Is Thistle and Bard like this going to be this massive company? I'd sure love to think it will. But yeah. But that's where we were. That's what made me start Thistle and Bard. There's a lot that I went through in this time, and that I'm not going to kind of like talk you through the full nitty-gritty details of. There was a lot of stuff that went on that, in addition to that informed my decisions. However, would I go back to that company? No, absolutely not. Not until I think it has figured out what it is doing, because, or at least will tell any of its employees, specifically the ones who were doing what I was doing, what the grand plan is. I would never go. I would not go back. But I am always open to the idea of, like, you never know what the future holds. And I like to keep my ear to the ground because, for the most part, as you can tell from what I do at the moment, nerd culture is extremely accepting, very fun to work with, extremely creative. It fills my joy cup. With all of the cool stuff that's available to it. And yes, I always keep my ear to the ground, and I would always be interested in working in that kind of thing, which is what I'm currently doing. So yeah, anyway, that is the nitty-gritty story. Some good, some bad, some ugly, about how Thistle and Bard became my full-time job. And I don't think that's probably a story that you'll find a lot on YouTube. So if you enjoyed this, then feel free to stick down some comments and things. Give me a thumbs up if you've just stumbled upon. I would love you to join my channel. There will definitely be more coming. Maybe not like this. Certainly a lot more upbeat. I fully intend to do videos on things like how I design clothing, how I format a book, particularly children's books, for example, because we just had one of those that we got a golden one for. I always say we, I do mean me. There'll probably be some speed paints in there as well. So do please go hit that bell. Remember to hit for notifications, because you can join somewhere, and unless you hit for notifications, YouTube will not tell you anything about the channel that you just followed. So make sure you've done that. Hit the bell, hit the follow, hit the like. When you've done those 3 things, which will probably take you about 30 seconds of your life in total to do it, then you'll be part of this wonderful community that I'm hoping to build here at Thistle and Bud. And you can join our fantasy worlds. Make sure you kind of go through this. You will find us on our various links, like I said at the beginning. I will also put them down there, right down there in the, what's it called? The little information bit down at the bottom. And you can come and find me on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, social media in general. You can search us on Google, and of course we have the Thistle and Bud shop. Every single order on there goes towards supporting me, goes towards supporting this channel. And at the moment, we are currently doing the Wonderkin project, which is a not Kickstarter. I will be doing another video on that another time, because this one is already long enough. So I will see you very soon.
Bright like a diamond in the glam. Every move I make, they know my name. In the center of the stage, I claim my fame. Lights are flashing, crowds alive. With every beat, I start to thrive. In this world, I'm here to stay. Watch me as I rule the day.